It's draft talk time on Prime Sports Network, the Prime Sports Network channel, and of course, in conjunction with the ourlads.com scouting website. We're excited because we're getting that much more near towards the end of the regular season. There's only 4 teams left, so there are 28 fan bases out there that are already thinking about the 2023 NFL Draft. And it's time for me to welcome in the man who's going to be with me and is going to continue to be with me. And he's already been with me for the first few months. And if you've missed any of these pre-draft shows already, well, check them out. They're on the channel. You can also check them out, of course, linked at ourlads.com. Dave Syvertsen. Dave, good to talk to you again.
Yep. How's it going, man?
It's going good. So another playoff round behind us.
Another 4 teams join the draft playoff pool.
Yes. And what we're going to do is break down early team needs on our shows for the next week. We have 3 shows today, Thursday, and next Monday that we're going to be recording. We're going to do the top 8 teams and we're not talking about the trades. So if you're a fan of the Rams, this is the show we're doing. So, yes, the Rams traded their pick to Detroit, but the Rams are slotted in based on their win-loss percentage, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Same thing. Who's the other team? Denver and Seattle. So we're not talking Seattle yet. We'll be talking Denver instead. Next week, actually Thursday, on our next show, we are going to have 10 teams, and then we're going to wrap up next Monday with 14. That'll be the entire 32 teams. And again, this is real early, Dave, because as we were talking before, going over the early team needs, it's like half of this stuff is just going to go old real quickly when it comes to contracts and especially free agency and maybe even potential trades or that we're hearing or whatever. And head coaching news. There's just so much that's going to change these early team needs within the next month or two.
Yeah, I think the discussion right now centers around what did this team do poorly this past year and what looks like is what players are coming off the books, what players are free agents. I went into this saying, hey, every single free agent on this team is not coming back. I know that will not be the case. But when we talk about team needs, what caused the Chicago Bears to finish atop the draft? They had a really rough year. A lot of things went wrong. Their team needs for the draft will change between now and then. But right now, we're going to stay in the moment. We're not going to predict who they sign in free agency. We're not going to predict who's going to come back from their own free agency list. It's going to keep this as simple as possible. What are the needs that are preventing them from being a Super Bowl contender? And that is really where I went with this when we initially wrote this up.
And remember, of course, questions, comments, you can leave it in the description area. Actually, in the description area, we also want to remind everybody to check that out because we're going to have links to the ourlads.com website where Dave has his new top 96 rankings out. So this is the first one you've done since, was it
November.
Late December?
November,
early December or late November?
I think I have it saved as late November. Yeah.
Okay. So that's about a good almost 2 months.
Yeah, what makes this list unique and a little bit more accurate, if you want to call it that at this point, still a lot needs to be done, is now we have a full list of players that are actually declared for the draft, right? There were some players in that top 96 back from November that are not in this draft. They went back to school. Jared First, for example, Florida State edge rusher, right? But then there's also players that, to me, surprisingly declared for the draft that are now in this top 96 that I did not include back in November. So this top 96 has a little bit more, I would say, validity to it.
This is like the post-eligibility rankings list. Now you know who's going or who's not.
Yes, now we know who's going to be in the draft. We have that full list of players, and now the list just feels a little bit stronger.
And, of course, that'll continue to be updated because we haven't even we still have the All-Star games coming up in a couple of weeks. So it's East-West. A couple of days later, it's the Senior Bowl. We'll do a show to recap those 2 All-Star games. And then we'll also have another mock draft show. We're going to have several of those, so keep that in mind. We're going to get through these team needs first, then we're going to do our first mock draft show, which will be in early February. And then we're going to go into the post All-Star game, reports. We'll do a post-scouting combine report. Then after the combine, we'll do another mock draft show. Then in late March, we get into serious team need shows. These shows, but like, on steroids. So especially since we're going to know exactly what these teams are seriously in need of after free agency, because that's actually our first show. It's probably going to be a week after free agency begins.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, I put as much pride into the team need stuff as anything with our lads. That was one of my first roles with them for their draft guide, was to write up team needs for 16 teams. And the amount of work and time that I put into that, I actually had a little bit more fun kind of predicting what positions teams would go after in the draft than the actual mock draft. I mean, mock drafts are... To me, I still think they're a silly exercise. I know they're necessary. It's a necessary evil.
Sure.
But
like you said, to know the position and what they're looking for, or even just having a report like this now that even magnifies more of what you write down. Because even when you post that content that you did, now you get to add even more information in say a 5 or 10 minute, because now we're probably going to do like 2 to 3 or 4 minutes per team. We might do like 15 minutes per team when we do them in March, and then we're going to really seriously go over it. But that'll give you the opportunity to say, look, it's not necessarily about what the name I put on that list, but just hear me out.
Yes. Yep. That's exactly it. Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, and then after that mock draft show from following the combine, and the team needs, the ones I just mentioned, then we do our final rankings, offense, defense. Then we'll have our final mock draft show, which probably will be the Monday of draft week. And then don't worry, because once the draft is over, the very next week, we will begin our post mock draft shows. We'll talk about all the players and the teams and all that stuff, because we have a draft review guide that'll be coming out. And we're going to want to make sure that we get you prepared for that as well, because the draft guide will be out, usually the first week of April?
Yeah, we usually have it in your mailbox by the second week of April.
Okay. And then the draft review guide, is that in early June?
Yes, it's out in June. Yep.
Okay.
We work on it throughout the month of May, and our deadlines are in June.
Yep. And so, of course, in May, we'll do all those shows, too, to get everybody ready for the draft review guide. Before we get started, a viewer comment, and I believe it's Maven. It's Maven of Macau. I believe that's who it is. And he brought up the running back class because, as I mentioned, we have a bunch of shows that are on demand. We broke down rankings for positions, and we posted them up individually as well. And Maven of Macau, and this is very important because, as we said then, and we'll continue to say now, there's a lot of players that we didn't have time to talk about. So Maven of Macau, everyone is talking about Sean Tucker and Devin Achani.
Yep.
Is it Achani or a chain?
A chain.
A chain.
Yep.
Okay, Devin Achane. Yeah, that's another thing I have to make sure we get all that pronunciations all set to go. Yeah. Also, still got Tank Bigsby believers out there. Why didn't these guys make the top 10? And you can tell us what you think about those guys, because again, they didn't make your initial top 10 at least.
Right. So, like I said, I've been saying this for a couple months now. This running back class is stacked. So if someone does not make the top 10, let's make sure we don't term that as an indictment to the player himself or the prospect himself. In a normal class, and I don't consider this running back class normal, a Tank Bigsby is probably top 7, top 8. But because of the depth in this class, I have a really hard time taking Tank, who I like. I just wrote him up actually last week, putting him in front of these guys that I do. And it's not an indictment of Bigsby. It's how much I like the guys in front of him. So Bigsby is an NFL back. He is excellent at keeping his hips square to the line on outside runs. I think he's made for his own running scheme if he gets hooked up with a team like San Francisco, who just pulls running backs out of the sky and creates production.
You could have a guy like Bigsby who could end up like 13th on your list, and a guy that's 3rd on your list, but it all depends. Hey, where do they get drafted? What scheme do they go? And Bigsby could end up with a better career than the guy that you had number 3.
Right. I mean, Bigsby is not, I wouldn't even term Bigsby as below these guys. Maybe on a stack of 12 where you just see vertical rows, right? But the way a lot of teams do this and the way I do this personally is I put guys into tiers. And if you within your tier, Bigsby is in the same tier as a Sean Tucker, as an Eric Ray, as an Achane, Deuce Vaughn, right? He's in that same tier. But if you're going to make me pick one right now, gun to my head, I pick the other guys ahead of him. But I think Bigsby, couple ball security issues that I don't like, couple receiving skill set things I don't like.
Yeah.
Those were the two factors that really prevented me from putting him up that high.
Yeah, and once you start getting real close, and you're like, I got these 5 guys or 3 guys, and I can flip a coin. It's when you talk about little things like the fumbling issues and pass protection and receiving, and that's usually where you have that cutoff line where you go, all right, well, this guy now goes ahead of that guy, and it makes it a lot easier. So
yes, it does.
All right. Let's get started with the Chicago Bears. And the Bears, now the one thing that is very important as far as the Chicago Bears is not only the fact that they now have the number 1 pick, thanks to Houston's win at the end of the season, but they also have the most cap space. They've got the combination. Now, let's keep in mind the numbers we're using for the salary cap are, once again, it's early on because we know that this is going to change an awful lot, not just when you start spending money in free agency, but it's also once you start thinking about those teams at the bottom end of the salary cap, like those last 10 or 12 teams, and you're a fan of those teams, and you're real nervous because you see they're minus in salary cap. It's too early. They're going to do a lot of juggling. They know what they're doing. Don't worry about that stuff. It's a lot easier to manipulate the NFL salary cap now than it has ever been. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I just think right now it's awesome for teams and fan bases like the Bears when they look and find out that you can have potentially over $90 million in cap space. And Ryan Poles, this will be his second draft. Matt Eberflus, this, of course, is going to be year 2 when he coaches the team next year. And by the way, you sent your list in, and we're going to have all of this information available for on every team's depth chart as well. So for now on, when you go to the Ourlads depth chart, you'll be able to see, hey, not only will you be able to look at just find out what's going on with your team, but just scroll down and you'll be able to see the early team needs list that Dave puts together as well as the updated one of March. But I just wanted to say you sent your information initially to the war room there to get it posted at Ourlads, and when you did, I just had to briefly look over just to make sure we were on the same page for the format. But I made sure to not even look at any of yours. I wanted to make sure that it was like, okay, I've got mine, you've got yours, you're the expert. Let's see exactly how I do going up against what you think at this time might be their top 3 needs. So I think on offense, I think the number 1 is either they have to decide on a center or potentially a right tackle for Riley Reiff. What do you think about that? Because Reiff's a free agent right now.
The number 1 need on this team is without a doubt the offensive line. That's where I wrote in. I just wrote offensive line. And I think, like you said, there's multiple spots on that line that need to be fixed. I think the pass protection is what needs to be fixed first. Justin Fields, there were 18 quarterbacks that dropped back to pass more than him, and he was by far the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. Part of that could be on him. We know that. Young quarterback, maybe likes to hold on to the ball a little too long, a little bit too confident in his legs. Yeah. All right. But I think the pass protection comes first.
But there are good things, and I want to ask you about this as a draft-related question. Are you surprised how well Braxton Jones took over in camp and was because they had injuries along the offensive line as well, but how well he played? He started every game the entire rookie season at left tackle as a 5th-round draft pick, and he's not even an FBS player.
Shocked. That it was probably, if I had to say the biggest 3 surprises of the draft class, he's on there. He's right next to Tariq Woolen from Seattle. Woolen gets a little bit more hype because of the turnovers, and nobody gives offensive linemen any love. Braxton Jones is one of the best stories of the draft class. And is he the franchise left tackle of the future? He can be, but if you do go into the draft and saying, hey, we have a Broderick Jones, a Paris Johnson, probably not at number 1 overall, but if they do bump down a little bit via trade down, you could make a case to put Braxton over at right tackle and bring in a higher graded player and put him at left tackle. But to me, the guy proved that he can hack it on the outside at left side. So that right tackle spot is a little bit easier to
Yeah,
fit.
absolutely. Maybe you
And
even
I
bring
say,
back Rife on a cheap contract because they have the money.
right. Yeah, they do. They have the money, and I think it's a nice backup option. They also have Alex Leatherwood, a first round bust
Prospect,
from the
yeah,
Raiders,
yeah.
but they're going to try to develop him. I don't think this team is far from having a
No,
good offensive line.
Jenkins is right now developing into a top interior player.
Yep. I mean, we're seeing this more and more. Tackles that were not NFL tackles. They were good college tackles, but you put them inside, and now all of a sudden they're considered a plus athlete inside. And then, Jenkins, especially, all the power in the world. He's explosive. That's what you want in the middle of your line. You combine that with Cody Whitehair. The center and right tackle positions are the two needs that are needed the most.
Yes.
I lean more towards the pass protector, which is on the right side at tackle.
Yeah, and look, we know center. You're not going to draft that guy early, so we just get that out of the way. But it is going to be a position they're going to have to take a look at because Lucas was kind of brought in on a 1-year deal, even though it was a 2-year deal, because they could pretty much let him go. I believe they could save like $4 million in cap space if they let him go. Again,
Right.
They don't need the money to save the money, but we'll just keep an eye on that. But again, it's not going to be an early guy. Whitehair makes a lot of money, but I think they can afford it. He's a steady presence, so no reason to screw around with that. On defense, though, and by the way, the other position of need, I think, on offense, I think they could use like a chain moving receiver, like somebody that they can rely on. Again, middle round kind of guy, somebody that is just really good at finding creases in the zones that can help move the chains. But defensively, definitely the defensive line has got to be a major need, and which is why we talked on our defensive line shows about the whole idea of which direction would they go if they stayed at number one. Would they be going at defensive tackle or on the edge rush? And this is why we also said that chances are that even if they trade down a little, they don't want to probably trade down too far away from either one of those two top players.
Yeah, I mean, I think both Jalen Carter and Will Anderson, they bring exactly what the Bears need. They need a sack artist on their team. They need a guy that on third down, they're going to be the ones to go and get the passer. They're going to affect the passing game. That's what they want the most. I look at their current depth chart right now and I'm saying, is there a spot that lacks depth more than the other? Are they weaker inside than they are on the outside? I mean, think in the past year, they've traded away Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn, right? And they're left with fifth-round pick Dominic Robinson, who I love from an upside perspective. But there just isn't much on the outside. And again, if you're asking me, what do I want? I'm going Jalen Carter. What do I think they're going to do just based on NFL tradition? Will Anderson just seems to be, I would say, like the 70-30 favorite right now.
And then again, that's if they stay there, because with all the needs they have, a cult Chicago trade, it just seems too easy to not work somehow.
Yes, it makes all the sense in the world. And that, I think the one person that holds the keys to that decision is Colts owner Jim Irsay. He's an aggressive guy. Is he okay? We'll get to the Colts in a little bit, but is he okay with taking a step back, going for a rookie quarterback and rebuilding it, even though the rest of the roster is pretty strong? They just don't have the quarterback, and he might want to, for the third, fourth year in a row, go the veteran route. With a limited ceiling.
And look, we don't even know who their coach is yet. So
I know that's
I can't imagine if it's a legitimate credentialed coach that guy's not going to go in there already with an understanding that not only am I running this offense, but you have to assure me that you will do what you need to do to move up so I get myself a quarterback, or stay at 4 and I get a quarterback. But we're drafting a quarterback with our first pick.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right. By the way, also on defense, they need the linebackers on the outside, but when you run a 4-3, that's not something you need to worry about too early with all the other needs they have. How surprised were you of Jack Sanborn's play? As soon as they get rid of Raquan Smith, Sanborn comes in, wasn't even drafted, and man, he played really well until his injury, and that is a huge relief looking forward and saying, hey, that's a position that we've already got checked off now.
Yeah, when you consider the drama and the finances revolved around that Roquan Smith trade, you feel a lot better about it now after watching Sanborn play. And maybe Chicago had an inside track there, saying, "Hey, this dude can play. Let's get him on the field at a fraction of the price."
You have to
It's
have
definitely not
that. You have to have a certain number of players in your team that are not making money. It's the only
have
way
to.
you survive in this league.
Have to. And so, yeah, I think Sanborn is the guy in the middle. He could use another one next to them. They play nickel more often than not. So I don't think they need two guys in there. But Nicholas Morrow, who is probably their best linebacker outside of
Yes.
Sanborn, he's currently a free agent.
Yep.
Will he come back? Right now, I'm saying no. No. So if he doesn't, that's going to open up a big hole there as well.
Oh, speaking of free agents, we have to talk about Montgomery. Look, I know they got a lot of money, and as long as, especially since it's a running back, as long as Montgomery's not asking for who knows what crazy dollar amount might be in his head. All right, we got the money. We'll bring him back. Herbert, Montgomery, we're good. But when I'm rebuilding, like the Bears are, I'm just not going to spend my money there when I've got Khalil Herbert. That's just sitting on the bench. And he could do just as good as a job, I believe, than Montgomery if he's given the chance. Draft another running back in the 5th round or sign another free agent and use, even though you have the money, it's still going to cost you, you would think, I don't know what, 15, 20 million guaranteed, maybe, I guess. Why spend it at Montgomery when you're rebuilding at this point in time and you already have Herbert?
I agree. I mean, Herbert, a 6th-round pick, in my opinion, right now, take the money out of it, is a better running back than Montgomery. He's going to be coming back from an injury, so that's something that has to be accounted for. But we all know this by now. You can find the running backs day 3 every single year. I'm not one to say that I'll never pay a running back, but in this situation, like you said, there's just no point in a rebuilding roster committing, no matter how much money you have, that much money to a player that is probably the 2nd-best player in the depth chart.
And you have Ebner as well. That's a solid number 2 if you want to put. The only thing that I question whether they do that, though, is because they did not trade him at the deadline. And I couldn't understand why.
Yeah, Montgomery?
Yes. Because why wouldn't they? You're telling me nobody was willing to give you anything unless they felt that, they were just going to give us garbage and maybe we can still get Montgomery for a reasonable amount that makes sense for us. Otherwise, it's possible they're still thinking of keeping him.
It's possible. And again, from his perspective, general manager Ryan Poles, you say, hey, we have so much money. We're still not paying a quarterback. We're not paying an edge rusher. We're not paying a corner right now. This won't hurt us as much as some other teams.
Yep.
But I agree with you. You can find David Montgomery day 3 of the draft any year.
And then at cornerback, that was the other position because even though you have Gordon and Johnson, Vildor is just, you can move on from Vildor. You need that 3rd corner in that defensive backfield, which has one of the top safety tandems in all of football. I'm not sure people understand that outside of Chicago, how talented they are at safety.
Yeah.
With Brisker coming in this year. But they need that number 3 corner too.
Yep. Yeah. 3 corners, like the nickel's a starting spot on the defense now. It's no longer a backup. And Kyler Gordon, even he played a lot of football this year, took his lumps as a rookie. He was one of the lowest graded rookie corners in the league. But again, I think the upside is too high there. He's too early in his career to move on from him. But I'm big on prep yourself for something not working out. And a cornerback would be good value at any point in the draft for these guys outside of round 1.
Okay. Let's now move on and talk Houston Texans football. Of course, unfortunately, they have the 2nd pick, not the 1st pick. We'll see whether it really matters in the long run. But look, this could be very simple. Would have been very simple. They would have just lost that last game. All right, Bryce Young, let's move on. But look, seriously, this isn't about who's the 1st pick in the draft or who's there. This is about what they need. And we all know that they need a quarterback. But I would say if I had to pick because they have so many needs. So if I had to say top needs, I would say on offense, besides quarterback, I'd say center. And on defense, definitely more edge rushers. And I don't know, maybe a strong safety to pair with the kid Petrie, who played really well as a rookie, another really good rookie player. So maybe I'd say edge rusher, center, and quarterback is my top 3.
I like it. Yeah, I mean, quarterback is number 1 for me. There's no question. Don't even need to talk about it. They average the league low 4.7 yards per play. They don't have a future in Davis Mills. I think he's a solid backup. Wouldn't mind him competing for a job, like Matt Schaub type player to me, but someone that you also just don't want to have a commit long term to.
Sure.
The second biggest need on this team to me, especially if they're going to go out and get a quarterback, I would love to see them pair their new young quarterback with a new wide receiver. And with where they're
Really?
picking their second pick of the first round, it is right now maybe be a little rich for where you're going to draft the first receiver. But I think Houston is going to be in a position to draft whatever wide receiver they want with that pick. Brandon Cooks, I don't think there's a long-term future with
Oh no,
Houston.
he's just he's like his contract's untradeable though, which means he probably is with them for one more year though.
At least one more year.
Yeah.
And to me, a team like Houston, let's not think about 2023 when it
No,
comes to the
no.
draft. Let's think about the second year of this quarterback being in the league. That's when your window opens, right? With these rookie contracts at quarterback. And that's the way I would build this roster right now is what can we do to make this team in 2024 a playoff contender? And I think Cooks is gone by then. Mechie, Nico Collins, two solid players, but I don't think either one of them could be a number one.
So they're both
If
strong number 2 candidates.
number 2/number 3,
Number 3.
absolutely.
So they need the number 1 guy, is what you're saying.
Yes, and that's where again you're going to get some disagreements on this. I personally think Quentin Johnston is capable and a credible number 1 receiver type threat, even though there is some high risk within his game. There's a lot of rawness there. That's a match I see making a lot of sense for this team is get the quarterback, get the wide receiver, and then use the rest of the draft.
Where is their second pick?
I believe it is right around 12. I'll get you that. It's 12.
So do you believe Johnson will be available at 12?
I do think he'll be available at 12.
Wow.
I don't think any receivers will be going top 10 this year.
That would be something. That would be a very okay. Now, what about if they wait? Who is the top tight end prospect? Is it Meyer?
Asking me, my top 96, spoiler, I have Dalton Kincaid one spot ahead of Meyer on the top 96. So right now they're kind of 1A, 1B.
Where would they draft? Where would they be slotted in?
In the 20s, I'd say.
Okay.
Maybe late teens.
So you might be able
20s.
to pick up one of those two guys, maybe with the first pick in the second round.
It's possible. It's possible. I would say 60-40 that they're both going to go in the first round. But if you really love one of them, right, you could make a slight move up.
Trade back in. Yeah.
How
about that? How about you excite your fan base with your quarterback, your wide receiver, and your tight end with the first 3 picks?
I'm telling you, man, I think Kincaid, he's even more than Meyer. This is why I'm putting him in front. I think he has.
Oh, yeah, he's awesome. Yeah.
I think he's got superstar potential
I agree.
For the position.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
he's just overlooked because he's on the West Coast. You don't get the TV time that Meyer's a good player, but that guy, especially when you see him, how much he sort of reminds me almost in a way, not as a player necessarily, but sort of the way Kittle plays, like he's always kind of banged up because he's like giving his all. And that's like Kincaid, he's just always hurt, banged up, but that's because he's like the focal attention of the offense and he's constantly getting, the tough yards. So
yeah, he gets all that's exactly the way he gets all those tough yards after contact. Let me ask you this though, Greg, do you see Sean Payton ending up in Houston somehow?
No, I can't imagine that. That would be, well, I tell you what, in a way, the only reason I can see that happening is just because of the fact that we know how big his ego is.
Right.
And he would be like the Messiah coming to Houston like he was in New Orleans, a franchise that has basically done nothing. And I'm gonna be here, and I'm gonna have Bryce Young as my quarterback somehow. I don't know how I work it out, but he's gonna be our guy, or C.J. Stroud, I guess. But I'll have my quarterback, and then we'll move on.
So yeah, I mean, I just think if that were a situation to happen, I mean, there's going to be compensation. So I don't know if they'd have to lose one of these picks, but that would make all the sense in the world to me. That Sean Payton goes to Houston, he gets his quarterback, he gets his receiver, he gets his tight end with his first 3 picks. Now we're talking.
Yeah, I do wonder what that because the compensation is probably going to be significant.
It is.
So I don't know whether or not
it's going to cost the first round pick.
Yes. So I don't know whether it would be this year or the next year. Probably this year. So
right.
But yeah, that could be. And look, a lot of these teams that we're talking about on this show today don't have a head coach.
Yep.
So, all right. And then, again, center, though, is definitely because let's keep in mind that Howard and Tunsil, as long as Tunsil is resigned after this year, he's got one more year. So you would think that they'll want to do whatever they can to resign him this offseason and give him an
Right.
extension. And Titus Howard, look, he was coming on last year and he really showed himself this year. So he is now somebody that they have to find out as well with one more year left on his deal, how to maybe lock him up. So hopefully they'll be able to lock up both tackles moving forward. The biggest thing that needs to happen, though, is Kenyon Green has got to have a much bigger year next year. We see this a lot with some rookies. They develop sometimes slowly. Green was pretty bad this year because that was such a risky pick when they made it that has to work. That has got to work.
Yeah, that he was bad this year. I mean, he and Evan Neal were probably the two most disappointing offensive linemen in the draft. And like you said, it's okay. Year one, we see this happen a lot in the league where, especially in the lines, these guys come back and put together much better sophomore seasons than what they initially did. But the middle of the offensive line, it needs to be built up, especially if you're going to build some of the offense around Dameon Pierce. Downhill runner, need to get pushed off the ball and build off that strength. If you're going to march out the likes of the 2022 version of Kenyon Green and Justin Britt at center, you're going to see very similar results.
Yeah. See, that's why I said center was one of my top. Not early, but they need even if they intend to bring Britt back, they have to have their future center, who, if worst case scenario, slides in at guard his first year or something like that. But
Right.
they have to add another interior presence because if Green doesn't work out, then they've got to have some insurance in the interior of that defense, of that offensive line. Okay, next up, the Arizona Cardinals. That is our next team to take a look at. Who would have thought that Arizona would be picking third? I still can't believe that. You sure this is right? Arizona's picking third.
They were 4-13.
I know, it is just so weird. That's because they lost like so many games. Like, did they end their season like on like losing like 11 out of 12 or something like that?
Yeah, I mean the wheels completely fell off towards the end of the year for that team.
It's just hard to believe.
Every time I watch them, I was saying Cliff Kingsbury wants to walk out of the stadium. He looked like he wanted nothing to do with them.
So another team with a new head coach and offensive coordinator. We'll see if Vance Joseph, I can see him staying, depending on who the head coach is. But now they have a new general manager. So we have no idea where Austin Fort's going to go. All those years in New England, spent a few years in Tennessee. A lot of rumors about, will Hopkins even be there? But one thing I did notice is that, let's say everybody returns skill position wise, they're set on their skill position. They don't need receivers. They don't need a tight end. They don't need running backs. They don't need a quarterback. So at least they go into this draft in a situation where, you know what? All right, we got to fix a little bit of our offensive line in the interior. Hudson, I don't even know if he's going to be back. He's probably going to retire. So we need a center. We have to re-sign or get new guards because Hernandez, Pugh, and Garcia are all free agents. But then that's it. Then you look on defense, and that's really where Arizona is going to spend most of their time upgrading besides the offensive line, especially up front with J.J. Watt retiring. And, of course, Zach Allen is also a free agent.
Yeah, I mean, it's defense for this team. They allowed the second most points in the NFL. Their top two corners are free agents on a cornerback group that was not very good. They lose J.J. Watt to retirement. You would have to find three players on that team to combine all of their sacks. That equals what J.J. Watt did in 2022. They had nothing behind him. A couple of younger pieces that are worth kind of keeping an eye on. Cameron Thomas, Majai Sanders, both drafted last year. But those are the kind of guys, whenever I go into the team meet process, I just say, hey, am I going to make my plans around these guys or not? I'm not making draft-related decisions based on Majai Sanders and Cameron Thomas.
Those are third-rounders. Those are not third-round pick of the draft kind of guys.
Right. And, it's not like they were flashing all year, right? So I think that you can flip a coin. What's a bigger need, corner or the pass
rusher?
The defensive line, and I mean it could be defensive line too if you find an interior.
Well, rusher. Hey, how about this? As the third pick, if Chicago, let's say they trade the. Let's say two things. One, they trade the pick. All right, quarterback. We can now go with we got Will Anderson here. Perfect.
Right.
Fits per.
Yeah.
Let's say they don't. Let's say they go Carter. Quarter. We still get Anderson. So there's a great chance that Anderson could be on the board when they go, and that would be perfect for them.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very similar to debate when we talked about Chicago. Do they go inside, outside? To me, I don't think it matters. I look at the depth chart right now.
How about the defense that they run? Considering it's a 3-4, do you think Carter better suited for either scheme, or he's so good it would matter?
Good question. I think he could play defensive end in a 3-4 and be fine. I wouldn't want to put him over center unless you're looking at specific pass rush packages. I think he's got the athleticism too, maybe a little oversized out there. But these defensive coordinators now, I don't think it matters that much to them, especially in this kind of scheme. You bring a talent like Jalen Carter to the team, and then you figure it out. You don't shut the door on a talent like that. If I was a betting man, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, I'd put a lot of money on one of these guys.
Oh, they'll get one of the two
for sure. And that's why I think the basement, if Chicago stays put, the basement for those two guys, the top two players in the draft, Will Anderson and Jalen Carter, is 3. I don't think either one of them escapes the top 3 unless there's a lot of quarterback movement at the top.
And again, we'll see what happens with Indianapolis if in fact they do trade up. By the way, on the offensive line, DJ Humphries will be coming back from injury, but Josh Jones, that's another player that really stepped up and played well when Humphries went down, because Jones wasn't doing much until he needed to play. And apparently, maybe part of the problem was he seems to be more comfortable at left tackle.
Exactly.
And now what do you do with that when DJ Humphries comes back?
That's exactly right. And that's the thing. I've talked to a couple of offensive line coaches where they've had a really hard time trying to develop a rookie on the opposite side of the line of where they're most comfortable or where they had the most experience in college. And, it's like the illustration he gave me, it's like wiping your ass with the other hand that you normally use. It just doesn't feel right. And some of these guys cannot get past that. What do you do?
Do you trade Humphries?
Do you trade Humphries? I don't think you trade an offensive line talent like that. I think you give him one more go at right tackle, Jones. I think Humphries is too good to move him around, trade him. And that team needs offensive line help. Yeah. If you're going to trade your best offensive lineman, I think it sends a bad message. And, it's not going to create more wins for them. You can't really base decisions off of Josh Jones. All right, he played okay. He didn't play great. Let's not really adjust too much for him.
Yeah, you're right. Give him another year. And Beachum, one of the more underrated, solid veteran tackles that just seems to go from team to team every 2 years. I just don't understand. But I get it. I know, but he's just always been solid. So maybe they bring him back.
Good guy to have in the locker room for sure.
They do have to re-sign both of their specialists, so keep that in mind. And do you think Murphy is worth re-signing? Byron Murphy, you disappointed with his career?
It's funny. I mean, I loved him coming out. He was my top-rated corner in 2019. He's played back and forth outside slot. I think he needs to stay in the slot. I think that's where he's best. What does the defensive coach, what does the head coach want to do? Do they want to change this defense at all? He's not a big guy. He's not long. He's not tall. And I even think his top speed is a little limited. So, you're talking about a corner that's not very big. He's not very fast and hasn't made a ton of plays on the ball. I think they're going to let him walk, but that only strengthens the notion that they're going to have to go corner early on, probably at the top of round 2.
Marco Wilson, I mean, he still has some potential to develop. So, we'll keep an eye on him. And Isaiah Simmons, you just don't even know. I don't even think he has a position.
He doesn't. Our lads, we haven't listed as their nickel. That's where he lines up the most.
Yes.
But it's not a true nickel. But it's this is what you get when you draft a player like that. And Arizona does not have the best reputation at putting guys in the best spot according to their skill set. Example: Hassan Reddick, right? I mean, they moved him around edge, off ball, inside. Mike, Sam, Will. Goes to Philly and becomes a near all-pro. We just want you to rush the passer, bro. That's it. Right, exactly. Just put your hand down and go.
That's it. Well, with Vance Joseph, he's only been there a couple of years, right? That's his
Right.
second. Yeah, so
Right.
that's why we'll see how that goes. All right, another team with a new head coach. We don't know is Colts, third straight team, and boy, talking about a key offseason. Another team, Arizona third and the Colts fourth. I mean,
Yeah.
no
What happens?
way.
Why they
So
play the games?
yes, so they need a new quarterback. There's no question, and we just talked about it. So again, if you're just listening to what we're saying here, as Colts team needs report, keep in mind we have the entire show where we did talk a lot about what could happen with the Colts, uh, especially at that quarterback position. If they decide, as you mentioned earlier on, Ursay, he's the guy in the room that just unfortunately is the one that has to make all the decisions. And he got very lucky with Ballard as his general manager. And now they have to get lucky and find a good coach, and most importantly, a quarterback. So once they get through that, um, they do have to re-sign Paris Campbell, so keep an eye on that. And Ngakwe was their leading sack rusher. They have to re-sign him or let him go. Who knows? Ngakwe seems like he's on a new team every year. Their offensive line, just a year and a half ago, was like the best offensive line of football, and it was a disaster this year. So they got to figure out what to do on the offensive line, especially at right guard and left tackle. And they also now have a huge problem with Shaq Leonard's 2 back surgeries because they're getting nothing out of the linebacker, and they also have to improve some more on the edge because especially if Ngakwe is not back, that could end up being their top need outside of quarterback.
Yeah, I mean the quarterback. It always again the only thing I bring up not drafting the quarterback is only if Jim Irsay wanted to make a huge splash move. Right, we've had a lot of big trades in the NFL. I don't see them going down that veteran back nine guy, Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield. Right, but is this a team that could make the splash move when trading for Lamar Jackson or dare I say Aaron Rodgers? Right, and now we're getting into crazy talk, I know, but the only reason I say that, the rest of the team, in my opinion, it's ready to compete. There are issues on the offensive line. Even Quentin Nelson had a down year for for the bar that he set for himself. But I look at the rest of the roster. I do think they can win. The quarterback is what held them most. Bad quarterback play set this team back more than any team in the league. All right, they were number one in the league in total turnovers, interceptions thrown, and fumbles lost. So any turnover metric you want to throw, the Colts were the worst. That starts with the head of the snake at quarterback. If you get a star in there and maybe you have to fork up number 4 overall for it, I think the team can contend in a division that is on the downswing right now.
Oh
Tennessee,
yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
Jacksonville,
transition.
that
Yeah, to
division,
say it
it's
nicely.
there for the taking. Yeah, it's there for the taking. So I know we need to keep this to draft talk only, and if they're staying put at 4 or trading up, it's without a doubt going to be for a quarterback. But let me ask you this: what do you do if somehow via trades someone else gets Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud? What are you doing at 4?
Well, first of all, before I even go into free agency, I've got to know. I've got to because I have to. But I see what you're saying. Basically, is what happens if there are deals made and you're on the outside looking in, because I can't
Right.
imagine they're going to go into the draft 1, 2, 3, 4, and they still haven't made a trade or other teams have. So yeah, they'll know before the draft. So in that respect, I maybe trade down.
Yeah.
I
Trade
got to
down
trade because I
and
still have to get a young quarterback in this franchise.
right.
It is so
Right.
important. And whether it's Will Levis, who I'm not a big fan
Yeah.
of, but okay, whether it's Will Levis or Anthony Richardson or one of those guys, then that's why the head coach is going to be so important because what
Right.
does
Yeah.
he
The
want to
quarterback.
do?
Yeah.
But I see what
I
you're
mean,
saying. I mean,
and also another way of looking at this is the 2024 NFL Draft. Do you really bottom out
think
this
about
year?
next year.
And
Yeah.
yeah, start thinking about Caleb Williams and Drake May and start to set up the roster and the salary cap for that position. I mean, we're going into the weeds on this, and I know we should probably just stick to what will the Colts do in this draft, but I think you need to consider all these options
Sure.
right now, that the quarterback, trading up for a quarterback, getting leapfrogged by another team that just makes an obscene offer to go and get one of those quarterbacks, trading for a veteran. But beyond that, I agree with you. The linebacker position needs some serious attention. I thought that was just watching their tapes this year. I thought that was the biggest downfall of their defense. Leonard being hurt, Okereke is going to be a free agent this year. I mean, you could go into next year saying, hey, the cover is pretty bare there. And you're not going to go at number 4, but the draft goes way beyond your first overall pick, right? Day 2, day 3, I think that's a spot where you're going to start looking at linebacker for this team. And I'll tell you what, you get the right linebacker, it's going to be a difference maker because of what they have up front.
Also, they have to, after this year, speaking of 2024, they've got to decide, okay, is now Gilmore at an age where they got to let him go? Grover Stewart's going to need a new deal. Kenny Moore's going to need a new deal. Jonathan Taylor's going to get ready for his deal. Michael Pittman's getting ready for his deal. There's a lot of money that the Colts are going to have to figure out going into next season, unless they can start doing that this offseason and get ready for that. So keep an eye on that, because Jonathan Taylor is going to command as much money as any running back would command. And after what just happened this past offseason, if you don't have the proper offensive line in front of him, you can't give him all that money.
Yeah, yep. I mean, he's got to stay healthy too. I mean, the injuries can, if you look at history and running back contracts, injuries they really will bring down the value. And if you're not sure what I mean by that, look at what happens to Saquon Barkley this year. He's going to get paid by somebody. He's not going to be at the top of the running back market because of the injuries that he's had. So Taylor, I don't think his injuries have been as serious, but there's enough there to cause some reservation in locking him into a really long-term deal.
And again, who would, after what you just saw, because it's not natural, who would spend a lot of money on Jonathan Taylor unless you felt you had either the Colts or another team had enough of, a top blocking unit in front of him to make him valuable as a running back for the amount of money that he's going to demand.
It sounds like they are high still on left tackle Bernard Raymond.
Sure, as well they should be. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and you knew when you drafted him, you knew he was going to come into the league saying it's going to be a rough 2022. But he did improve throughout the year. I thought he was one of the few tackles that improved as the year went on. His end-of-year tape was much better than his beginning of year.
And you think he should be considered their left tackle of the future?
Yes, I think they're going into this offseason saying we have the left side of the line and center locked up.
Yeah, so they do need to. It would be wise, though, at some point to add a younger interior lineman, maybe a center guard type, because they need a right guard. We know that. And maybe somebody that could eventually slide in for Ryan Kelly, because that is a player that, from what we've been hearing, has kind of digressed over the last couple of years. He's only 29, so it's not like he's over the hill. But if they really believe that he's been beaten up a little bit, maybe he's just not going to be the same player as he gets older, then eventually you'll want to definitely make sure that you have some added youth on that interior, but especially right guard. That might actually be their number one offensive line need then. Would you agree?
I agree. Yeah, the offensive line needs an upgrade at right guard. And like you said, depth is so important. We can't only look at the starting 5. They're very, very thin. Yep. The depth that they have, they failed in 2022. I think that was one of the reasons when the injuries piled up, they just couldn't keep it together.
Yeah, Pryor and Kelly, also free agents, and I don't even know if they'll resign those guys.
Yep.
By the way, Okereke is also a free agent, so keep that in mind at linebacker. And McLeod is a free agent, and he had a really good year, but he's older, and he kind of blocked Nick Cross, so you would think that that's going to be something that they're going to have to that's going to be a big decision. Are we ready to move Nick Cross now as the starting strong safety, and we just can't afford McLeod?
Yeah, I think they have their safeties of the future in Nick Cross, Rodney Thomas, and Julian Blackman. I think that's a trio that you can move on. You can move forward with.
Okay, now let us move on to team number 5, and that is the Denver Broncos. And a big surprise, the Denver Broncos will have a new head coach. So that's 4 in a row of new head coaches. And so we don't know who their coach is. We don't know who their offensive coordinator is going to be. So these are all guesses. If you take a look at the Broncos, though, Look, they've got their quarterback, so it's just a matter of somebody that will be hired is going to have to accept Russell Wilson's going to be there for a few years, and I can make this work with Russell Wilson. So we'll see where that goes. The Javonte Williams injury was awful. It was Williams and, of course, my boy Brees Hall. Those are the two major young running back injuries from last year. Both teams. Well, Denver had just they were one of those typical NFL teams that not only struggled, but they struggled because they had injuries all over the place.
Yeah.
And Williams was a big part of that. So I think they definitely have to they expect him to return, but they should probably get some insurance for Williams. I know they got a couple of free agents behind them, but they got to get some. But the offensive line has got to be their number one issue and need overall. They've got all sorts of problems. I mean, maybe they have one or two guys. Bowles is coming back from a broken leg, so I don't even think it's close. On offense, at least, it has to be. They've got to add 2 or 3 new starters, I think, on the offensive line this offseason.
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's where I had them pegged. The biggest glaring need is going to be on that offensive line. And part of that discussion will start off with what they do with Dalton Risner, who is a free agent. If he hits the market, he's going to get paid. He'll probably be the top available interior lineman if he hits the market.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a better interior offensive lineman that's going to hit the market. Now, if you stay with Quinn Miners and Lloyd Cushenberry inside, I'm okay with that, but I would want to draft their replacements in case they don't move forward, they don't progress. They probably still deserve another year. Part of their offensive line struggles, in my opinion, just came from a lack of experience and just a broken system overall. Right tackle, Billy Turner, I think he's got to be replaced. So
yeah, they got 4 tackles that are free agents.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody's a free agent at tackle except Bowles.
Yeah, and Bowles, even him, I'll tell you what, I mean, there's a lot of good and bad with him. He's one of the more inconsistent players. I like him. He's a good pass protector. But coming back from an injury, starting to enter, I think he's almost 30 years old now. You know, it's something that needs to be thought about. Round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5, round 6, round 7.
Depending on how much they spend in free agency, yeah.
Right. And here I am saying round 1, they don't have that first round pick. So, you know, Russell Wilson, whether you like him or not, whether you believe this or not, he's going to be there for at least another 2 years, minimum. And even then, I think it's going to be 3 years. So their mission needs to be, you know, you put as much support around him as possible. You're going to have to force feed that offensive line. You might even have to add, like you said, another threat in the backfield, because if Javonte Williams does go down again, or he has a hard time coming back from the injury,
they got nothing else.
You can't send Latavius Murray out there again.
No.
You know, I think you need a little bit more spark coming out of that backfield to take some of the pressure off Russell Wilson. I would love to see them get a better pass catching back. And there's a few of them in this draft class.
Who do you think, just off the top of your head, who kind of fits that mold, like in the early rounds?
So on day 2, I mean, I love Zach Charbonnet for that role. He's not the
Zach Charbonnet, though. I mean, we both love him. I mean,
yeah,
I think he's a number 1.
Yeah. I also don't think he's going to be. I would want a little bit more explosion. I think they have the bell cow bruiser in Javonte. So I'm looking at Deuce Vaughn, Devon Achane from Texas A&M, Eric Gray, who's one of my favorite pass catching backs, and they all bring something different from an explosive play, big play potential that they lack in the backfield.
All right, so we agree on that. On defense, you look at it, that defensive line, that 3-4 defensive line is just, I mean, especially with Tremont Jones, he's a free agent.
Yep.
So they have, I mean, I think they could get by another year at nose tackle with what they have, but they have to add some more talent overall up front, no question. They could add another edge rusher. Look, you can't count on Randy Gregory. When he plays, it's great. He does a good job as an edge rusher, but you can't really count on him. He seems to always be banged up. Browning got banged up. Benito is a nice little pickup. So you and in Cooper. So you like some of what they got there, but they still need a bona fide edge rusher, another really monster edge rusher, a young one as well. And then in the secondary, I think the only thing they got to really worry about is replacing 34-year-old Kareem Jackson. So to me, It's that defensive line, yes, but they got to get another edge rusher.
Yeah, I mean, I would even just say let's term this as they need another pass rusher. Whether that comes from the defensive line or from the opposite side of the edge rushers. Again, like I'm going to take Randy Gregory and just like again take him out of the equation. When he's at his best, he's awesome, right? That's a pretty good 1-2 punch right there between Browning and Gregory. But like you said, let's act like Gregory's not
Yeah,
there.
he's a
And
bonus.
yeah, and bonus, and you could always use another pass rusher. We hear this every year. It's an old adage, right? You could always use another pass rusher,
And isn't
and
it
that's
funny?
the
Just a
spot.
couple of years ago, it was Von Miller, it was Chubb, and it was the kid that they never invested in, the one from Tampa Bay, who
Barrett.
Shaquille Barrett,
Yeah.
who I was pleading the Jets for 2 years when he was still basically a free agent and he's a restricted, and I was just pleading with the Jets to sign this guy.
Yeah.
And he finally goes off to Tampa Bay and has the monster season in their Super Bowl. But just imagine that's where they were just a couple years ago. Now it's Randy Gregory.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Denver, they know pass rushers, and Gregory, to me, he's not it. But if they go into the draft and find the guy on day 2, I will be confident that he's going to work out. They know pass rushers. I don't know what they don't necessarily know what to do once they have them. They with the trades of, but they know how to scout them. They know how to bring them in, and I do think that it's an organizational philosophy to bring in an edge rusher that we'll see.
And they also have to, if you take a look at the secondary, I said they're pretty good there, but Darby is coming off the injury. So that's something to keep an eye on, is what do they do at corner? I mean, Mathis was a 4th rounder last year. So, we'll see about his development.
Yeah, he played well. Mathis played well considering where they got him. I think that overall, defensively, they should feel okay.
In the secondary.
And I think there's some upside if they bring back Draymond Jones. I think there's some upside in the front 7 to get the job done.
So do you think it's really offensive line clearly number 1?
Yeah.
And then on defense, you got to find another pass rusher.
Yeah, you could say offensive line is 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
And then you go back down to the pass rusher number 3.
All right, next up, the LA Rams. Yes. Again, believe it or not, we're talking the LA Rams at number 6, even though they won't be making this pick. But this is where the Rams are positioned based on their record. And, yes, they had a lot of injuries, but look, they sold their soul to the devil for that Super Bowl last year. And as a fan, you just hope that it was a 1-year deal. And then they can kind of get going again. But this is another team that had a ton of injuries. And it's going to happen. Now, not just to Stafford and to Kupp, but Robinson and all the way down the line. The offensive line was completely banged up. And speaking of the offensive line, that is, if I'm looking at offense, that is clearly the number 1 position that they have got to figure. They also got to figure out what to do with Noteboom because they have got to keep him healthy. Brush, their top pick last year on the line, also goes down with the preseason injury, out for the year, the 3rd round pick. But he was their first pick. And then Edwards, the left guard, had concussion issues. So the injuries aside, they still need to get some added depth, and that's why that's the clear number 1 issue. But on defense, I think overall, I would say that they would probably have to add some more talent on the defensive line. I mean, it's like Aaron Donald, and that's it. So, and he's on the verge of retiring any year now. And then the secondary, Troy Hill's a free agent at corner, and they have to re-sign Rapp at safety.
Yeah. I think safety is the potential big hole on this defense. I mean, consider the fact they have an all-pro defensive lineman, an all-pro linebacker, and an all-pro corner, right? And they're still ranking bottom half in the league in defensive football in most metrics. This is where their strategy of just selling draft pick after draft pick after draft pick.
Catch up to you.
It comes back and bites. I have a Rams friend, and I said, are you really happy, content with that 1 Super Bowl? And now you are potentially looking at some very dark days ahead if these injuries pop up, right? Part of the purpose of the draft to me is, other than building the nucleus of your roster, is anticipating injuries and being able to have guys that can step in. And they just proved that they couldn't do it. if they lose Taylor Rapp in free agency, I think he's going to be sought after. I think he's going to be a hard guy to re-sign. You're looking at a gaping hole in the middle of that defense at safety. I don't like Nick Scott. I don't see much in Jordan Fuller. Quentin Lake, Rusty's 2 late-round picks from last year. Are those really going to be the guys that solve the issue in the middle of the field? I don't think so.
This is another team that's in the negative, too, in cap space. So
right. Yeah.
I don't know how they come up with the money, but if they have to, like you said, I don't know how they do it, but they have to find a way that even if they don't sign anybody else of consequence, they've got to find a way to save every bit of money to get Rapp back.
Yeah. I think Rapp's a really important re-sign for them. But who knows there? And like you said, you opened up with the offensive line. It's definitely an issue. I mean, Andrew Whitworth meant a lot more to that team than I think people gave him credit for. And from a physical standpoint, but also just an intangible standpoint, being the leader of that group. And now you're looking at a quarterback that's definitely on the back nine of his career, does not move that well. I even think there's a hidden need at wide receiver. Allen Robinson was not what we thought he would be this year, and I don't know if there was something going on there or.
Oh, he was just overrated to begin with.
Right. So you're going to get Cooper Kupp back. I think by the start of the year, if I know Cooper well, he'll be back by the start of the year. But you had one thing I noticed this year, and they're playing with a backup quarterback for most of the year. But I didn't see any other wide receivers on that team kind of rise to the occasion.
No.
And
product of the system.
That's a sneaky need on that team.
Well, here's the problem. They've spent 2 second-round draft picks on Van Jefferson and Tutu Atwell. The Tutu Atwell one was the worst. I mean, we all knew it at the time. How do you spend a second-round draft pick on a diminutive kid like that?
Yeah.
It just made no sense. You could have
one-trick pony.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but again, fact is, I see what you're saying, and I can see it happening because the receiver position is so important to this scheme. But here's the problem, and I think at some point Sean McVay has got to – he may not feel that way because he won a Super Bowl without it, but they've got to find a way to run the football more.
Yeah.
Especially with a guy like Stafford back there. He would – because if you read – because you can't trust Cam Akers. So you've got to find, and Kyron Williams is just he's just a body. He's not somebody that's going to explode in the next year or two to be a star. So I'd rather, if I was going to pick a skill position, I'd rather go with a running back than a receiver. But I believe you that knowing McVay, they probably would go with receiver over running back.
Yeah, I mean McVay would just say, "Hey, we'll throw the ball 55 times a game." That's the way he thinks, and I don't know if it's ego or if it's a philosophy thing that he truly believes in, but I agree with you. They haven't invested enough in that running game up front too. I've always thought they haven't handled the offensive line very well. You could say I was wrong because they won the Super Bowl last year, but I've been saying this for a long time that once Whitworth goes back, you can see how bad that line is. And it's exactly what we saw.
And again, injuries killed him.
Yeah.
Because if you look at their offensive line right now, 4 of the potential guys, if they go with what they have right now, 4 of the guys that are starting on their depth chart were not there at the end of the season. Right. That's a serious issue.
Yep.
Havenstein, look, if you bring, Notebook will be back. Havenstein is fine. So you've got your bookends are okay. You do need to get a backup, somebody, because, Noteboom's never healthy for an entire season.
Right.
But without question, Allen is also injury prone at center. You just lost Bruss for the season. So, yeah, offensive line.
Edwards is a free agent, I believe. Didn't play that well this year anyway. But, there's a lot of questions on the interior.
Yeah. And by the way, if this isn't the best marriage possible for Baker Mayfield, I don't know what is. There is no way Baker Mayfield can go somewhere else because he's going to make a little bit more money.
Yeah.
First of all, I can't imagine anybody's going to give it to him.
Right.
So I think whatever amount of money that the Rams want to give Mayfield, they give him. And I think he is it's what we saw, and knowing McVay, the way he can coach quarterbacks, I think he's the perfect next guy in line once Matthew Stafford leaves.
Yeah. Yeah, you said it best. There's no point in him going unless LA really does not want him, and I believe they do. So there's no point. I don't care. I don't care who offers him what. Yeah, get away from the idea of wanting to start in the league. You're not going to be in a better situation around a better offensive mind than what the Rams have. So, yeah, I agree. Sit tight in LA, wait your turn again.
By the way, Troy Hill, I know he's more of a slot guy. Kobe Durant, the 4th-round pick.
Yeah.
How does that work moving forward? Because Hill's a free agent. Did Hill play more outside last year, and Durant slot? Because that's what the depth chart looks like at our lads, and I'm not sure exactly how that worked out. But
Durant was the primary slot for them, and he actually was a playmaker. He had a couple pick sixes this year, and they were speaking very highly of him in training camp at the beginning of the year. And it's almost like he's one of those guys that kind of just popped right away. He did play 167 snaps in the slot and 78 on the outside. Size-wise, I think he needs to stay on the outside. And then Troy Hill is going to get the numbers so you have something objective to listen to. Again, if they re-sign him, because I believe he's a free agent as well.
He's a free agent.
He was 452 snaps on the outside, 172 at slot.
Yeah.
So that's almost 3-1 there.
And Troy Hill should not be on the outside. I mean, if that's the case, then they probably should let Hill go, move Durant full-time in the slot, and then that means they got to go out and get themselves an outside corner.
I don't think Troy Hill will be back. Simply put,
they wouldn't be able to afford him anyway.
Yeah, they got rid of him once, and I don't think they're going to bring him back a third time now.
All right, now, and by the way, isn't it a shock almost when you see, and it's because of the movement from St. Louis to L.A., but isn't it a shock that Les Snead is in his 12th year?
Yeah, things go fast, don't they?
Woo.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's like, wait a second, and then you realize, oh, that's right, he was with St. Louis.
Yeah, he's been a trailblazer. He's done a good job, but again, they're basically.
And nobody talks about Les Snead.
Yeah,
and he's
right.
Come on, give him a little bit of some kudos there for what he's accomplished. All right, Las Vegas. We got 2 more to go. Let's get through this here. Las Vegas is next up on the list, and Dave Ziegler will be in year 2, of course. The whole Patriot Josh McDaniels deal, and they've got okay cap space, but the whole. The offseason starts kind of with what they do with Derek Carr.
Right.
I will tell you, and I'm going to be doing shows on this as a Jet fan, there is no way that I see Joe Douglas trading for Derek Carr. I just don't see it. I'm sorry, I just don't. I'd be completely shocked. I've been simpatico with everything that Douglas has pretty much been on. Remember, we talked about the whole Zach Wilson thing right after the Patriot game when everybody thought he was gone. You even asked me. I said he's not going anywhere. They're going to try to develop him. They're not giving, and they didn't give up on him. Everybody thought he was gone, but I know what Joe Douglas is doing, and I'd be shocked if he trades with Derek Carr. I don't think but Derek Carr will get traded. He's got a lot of money though, but I don't believe there's much dead cap space there. So I think the trade makes a lot of sense.
I think they need to do it soon though. I think it needs to be done before
March.
Yeah, I think there's I thought I saw a February 15th date.
Oh, really?
That he's got some money coming to him on that day. So I think that move's going to be pretty quick.
Okay.
What ends up happening? I mean, no question he gets traded, right? I mean, it's or released if there's going to be a big enough market for him that I think I'll be really interested to see what that market is though. Like, what does he actually get traded for? Probably similar to a Matt Ryan deal, Carson Wentz deal, like those day 2 picks that could be an option for the next year that could turn into another 2nd-round pick. But no matter where he goes, what does this team do at quarterback? Is Josh McDaniels in year 2 picking 8th, going to go after a rookie quarterback? Who
do you think fits a Josh McDaniel from once you get past the top 2?
Will Levis would be my pick for who I think fits their best, but I think they're going to try to make a bigger splash in the trade market. If there's a team that's going to make another big trade like they did for Devontae Adams last year, and that's a part of the equation.
So you're thinking along the lines again of Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers,
Tom Brady if he doesn't want to retire.
Tom Brady. Yeah, and I think Aaron Rodgers actually is probably the money. It just doesn't make sense to me how he's going to be able to be traded.
Yeah, I mean he just got re-signed, so I don't think that'll happen either. But
Tom Brady makes a lot of sense.
Jimmy Garoppolo, like, what is the relationship there with Josh McDaniels? Like, some of these quarterbacks, whether what we think about these quarterbacks or not, some of these offensive play callers, their ego is so big that they think they can make it work with anybody.
That's true.
And McDaniels has that experience. He made Jarrett Stidham look pretty good for 2 weeks anyway.
He does have the relationship with both Jimmy G and Brady, So
Yeah.
you would have to believe with both of those guys potentially available that
Yeah.
he's going to
One of
land
them
one of
ends up
them.
there. One of them ends up there is my prediction. So again, I wrote quarterback as their top draft need.
They have to resign Jacobs. Do you think they're going to
Yeah,
resign him?
that's a tough call. All pro, Josh Jacobs.
He's a beast. He's
Gun to my head. McDaniels likes the running game. He values the running back position. New England always did too. I think they resign him and try to get a little bit of a bargain deal with Jimmy G at quarterback. But if you want to look beyond the quarterback position, I think they've been a mess in the secondary. Just year after year,
yeah.
that organization just can't find guys to get the job on the back end.
Who's the first guy? If they pick the number one cornerback in the draft, if they because they could have that opportunity, who's that going to be?
Gun to my head, I think it's going to be Joey Porter or Kelly Ringo from Georgia. I still need to do a little bit more work on both of those guys.
But it's one or the other.
I think so. I talked to someone last week that thinks that Devin Witherspoon from Illinois has a shot at being the top corner.
Oh, that's crazy.
I don't know if that's a little aggressive. I have him, I think, right around stacked around like 25 on my top 96 overall, if I remember correctly. I think there's a bigger shot physically of Christian Gonzalez being the top corner. If you're going to pick someone that's not one of those top two guys, I think Christian Gonzalez is going to be picked ahead of Devin Witherspoon. But if you're asking me right now, before I do my deep dive on the corners, I think it's going to be Ringo or Porter.
It does sound like something the Raiders organization would do, though.
Yeah, just completely out of the blue. Yeah. Draft Alex Leatherwood in the first round. It's like
go with one of those other guys that nobody's expecting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But look, that could happen. That could definitely. And they also need to find another potential safety because Harmon.
Right.
Who knows where he's going? He is getting older. Hopefully, if you're a Raider fan, they can re-sign him for another year cheaply.
Yep.
Because Morig kind of struggled last year, but I would expect him to be okay.
Yep. Here's another way of thinking at it too, that you could take the corner out of it. I believe Brian Branch is going to be the first defensive player taken outside of Will Carter and Will Anderson and Jalen Carter. And if he is available at number 8 overall and the Raiders go elsewhere, I think Branch could be that guy. And I love the fit because he can play everywhere. And he can play nickel, he can play safety, he can play outside corner.
That makes more sense.
That makes
because he's clearly better. And I think you're saying this. He's clearly better. There's a gap between Branch and who that number one cornerback is right now.
Yes, that's what I think. That's where I think it's the defensive players are Carter, Anderson, Branch, and then you have a cluster of guys.
Yeah, so that makes more sense than to go after one of those other corners. Just go with Branch.
Yep.
All right, that makes sense. They also have to re-sign Perryman at middle linebacker, so they got to figure that out. He's an okay player, and he'd be fine to bring him back. They need outside linebackers though, but they can figure that later on. And they do need an impact defensive tackle. Now, I guess they're hoping the two late guys last year, Butler and Farrell, will eventually be those guys, but they didn't really show much this season. So
yeah, it was a rough year for the rookie D tackles. There wasn't really a lot of impact at that position league wide. But even if you do like Butler and Farrell, I don't know if they bring a pass rush to the table. And if they want more pass rush inside to kind of offset what they have on the outside in Jones and Crosby,
who's that? I think who would be that next guy after Carter?
Breesy from Clemson.
Breesy.
Probably going to be a first-round pick, so I don't think he's going to be there round 2. I think top 10's a little rich for him right now, unless he just blows up this pre-draft process. Round 2 name I love, lives in the backfield, is the kid from USC, Tuli Tuipulotu. He's one of my just favorite players to watch, one of the most productive in the country, and that's the kind of presence they need on the middle of that line. He fits that culture well, too. Like the hyperactive, high-effort, high-engine, guys that make a lot of hustle plays. I think he fits that culture pretty well.
And keep in mind, too, Hollins is a free agent. Renfro's coming off the injuries, and they really have nothing else at wide receiver after Adams. So they have to figure out the receiver position. So that could be that's definitely going to be a free agent or, later. I don't expect them with Adams there to worry about wide receiver draft early, but they got to do it a little bit later.
Yep.
And then also they have to re-sign Moreau because you're looking at Darren Waller's coming off an injury kind of plagued season, Moreau was the guy who was really the starter for most of the season, and he's a free agent.
I'm a huge Moreau guy. If I'm an NFL GM that needs a tight end, I'm on that. He's one of my first phone
So
calls.
you think he could blossom somewhere else?
Oh yeah, I think he's probably one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL, bar none. And then we've seen his skill set as a receiver grow, grow, grow. Monster after the catch, has all the size, trustworthy player. I think the price tag for Las Vegas to keep him is going to be very big.
So they probably won't be able to re-sign him.
I have a feeling he'll be playing elsewhere.
Okay.
And so that gives them a tight end need as well.
Yes, and then also they have to do something. They had good play at the tight end spot, at the offensive tackle spots. Even Munford looks like he's a player to keep an eye on. Parham, okay, he's going to have his second year next year. I think they can live with James at center, but they have a big hole at right guard.
Yep. If there's one area where I could see them spending in free agency, that's where I think they go. But yeah, if they end up after free agency with the same names on this depth chart, you'll see them draft someone. I would say with one of the first 3 or 4 picks.
Okay, and next up is the Atlanta Falcons as they wrap up our team needs for this show. Terry Fontenot in year 3, of course, the whole crew is back. They had nice progress, I think, all things considered, with that quarterback position a mess. Or at least they gave it a try with Mariota. It wasn't like he was a disaster. Who knows what they're going to do with him? But we all know Atlanta, again, is one of these teams that needs a quarterback. They've got a ton of cap space. There's a whole lot of talk. And this is even something that I was able to talk about with Kevin Knight from thefalcoholic.com, who covers the Falcons. In the beginning of the season, before it even began, he talked about this as a potential landing spot for Lamar Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody was talking about Lamar Jackson to Atlanta at that point. So I think that is definitely something to keep an eye on. He makes a ton of sense because they want to run the football at Atlanta.
Yep.
So really but if something doesn't happen there, what do you do? I mean, Ritter is not really he's not a number 1 guy for a reason, but you're at number 8. So what do you do with that spot? Do you say, okay, I'm going to bring in another guy, a Levis and a Richardson, and I'll have them compete with Ritter and just go from there? If it's not a big move to get Jackson?
This is a really tough call. I started putting together team needs and even thinking about the first mock draft that we're going to do at some point. I don't know if one of the quarterbacks will be there. There's in terms of teams leapfrogging them in the trade market, or just teams in front of them going quarterback. And I don't know if they're going to want to use another resource on quarterback. I think it's going to be Ritter again with another veteran that's going to come in from the outside, unless they make that big swing for the fence, like you said, with Lamar Jackson.
So this could be a Derek Carr thing.
Yeah.
Or Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's the Arthur Smith connection is real. And Arthur Smith, love him or hate him, he knows how to win games with the running game. He knows how to do it. Not every offensive coordinator, head coach knows how to do that. I don't think you can look at this Falcons team and look past how bad their defense is and how bad it's been for years now. They were 6 straight years. They were top 10 yards allowed defensively, 2014, 2019. Constant good defense. This is in the peak of the Matt Ryan era. But that side of the ball has fallen off of a cliff. They had Grady Jarrett, and beyond him, not much.
And now they have So they have a position available as well, right? A coaching position on that side.
Yeah. They have not wrapped that up yet.
So we don't know if they're going to be 3-4-4-3.
Yep. And Grady Jarrett, their top player inside, he fits into both.
What about the pass rushers from last year? Do you think they fit better as a 4-3?
I think they fit better in a 3-4.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you think that's where they'll stand then? You think they'll find a defensive coordinator who's more of a 3-4 guy?
I do. And I think they need to find another pass rusher. I think they need to find another corner. And I think they need another presence next to Jarrett. I mean, I think Grady Jarrett's one of the best defensive tackles in football.
Yes.
But he just doesn't have any help next to him. And
they need a really good nose tackle.
Right. The guys that are interior disruptors, they need another body next to them. They just don't have it right now. And they need to escape this draft with multiple starting caliber defense players.
Yeah, because if you look at it on offense, they don't care about throwing the ball that much to receivers. So
Right.
you've got your number one. Maybe they resign Zacchaeus. They'll give him a little bit of money, and then maybe you go out and you just get another guy, somebody
Right.
that's just a reliable middle round veteran presence, and
Yep.
that's it. Now you don't have to worry about receiver. You've got your star tight end. And the offensive line actually has improved dramatically thanks to drafting and the breakout for Caleb McGarry last year.
Who is a
So,
free agent?
who was a free
McGarry's a free
agent,
agent.
and he broke out, and now they got to pay him. But you think that's the question: is do they feel, oh, we waited for this until it was your final year, and you're going to make money, and then so. But I would think with the money they have, they bring back McGarry. They also have to re-sign Lidstrom as soon as possible, which means this offseason you take care of that because he's the star of the line. And then the drafting of Hennessy and Dahlman, that really, that really did upgrade the interior of their offensive line. So I think their offensive line is actually set as long as they re-sign McGarry.
Yeah, and I think part of what makes these guys look very good is McGarry had a rough start to his career. He's gotten a little bit better every season, I would say, but they didn't have to pass protect that much, and
True.
that's why this offensive line, to me, it's a little hard to truly evaluate because of what they had to do. Now they did a great job in the running game. They made a fifth-round rookie, Algier from BYU. He made the
Yes.
Our Lads All Rookie team, and trust me, I mean, I liked Algier, and I think he did a good job. That was offensive line and the scheme and the system. And my question is, if they do want to throw the ball more in 2023, can these guys do it? That's the question. They're better off than most teams on the offensive line, so I don't think they need to address
No,
it
exactly.
unless they
Yeah.
lose McGarry to free agency. But like you said, I don't think it makes any sense to let him walk. I would let Rashaan Evans leave at inside
Yes.
linebacker or Lorenzo Carter. I'd let those guys leave before
Yes.
I would break up that offensive line.
And also, they probably should add another running back because they have so much need for that position. Like you said, we can't say, look at Algier and say, okay, he's the guy. You got
Right.
to go, okay, he's a nice player. He could be a really good number one, maybe, but you
Yep.
have to have another guy because Cordell Patterson does a nice job, but he's also getting a little older. When she loses a little bit of that speed, it's all over.
Right.
And you have to bring in another another running back at some point. Yeah,
Yep.
these guys are okay, the backups, but that's system and then not talent. They need to either free agency and maybe because they got the money. I don't know who'd be available, but maybe one of these running backs become available that we just talked about that's not going to get signed, and maybe Atlanta spends some of the money there because it is the most important single position besides quarterback on their team because that's how
Yeah.
they run their offense.
And they will. I think they would pay someone if someone came available. If somehow the Giants let Saquon Barkley shake
Oh,
free,
what a great move that would be.
that's a team that I've from the beginning of the season I said if the Giants move on, I think that's the team that Arthur Smith would just have that beeline towards Saquon. And even though Algier had a good year and you have Cordell Patterson in the backfield, they would find usage for all three of those guys, no question. And it takes a lot of pressure off their quarterback position. They have the offensive line in place already. It makes a lot of sense economically as well as personnel wise.
I just think bringing Lamar Jackson in here, if it works, and I can't imagine if Lamar Jackson even had in any way, shape, or form a say in it, this would be the perfect place for him. And it also makes sense because you have Desmond Ritter as a backup. So
Right.
you already have a young quarterback
Yeah.
behind him in case he
That can
gets
run.
hurt.
And that can run too. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's got a little bit of mobility. So just imagine what an offseason it could be for the Falcons fans if you're able to work out a deal for Lamar Jackson and then sign Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. That would in that division too. That division's down as well. You know, Tampa Bay just won the division. Weren't they? They were under 500, right? I mean, it's
That means all you would have to do with the rest of the money you have and in the draft, defense.
defense. Don't even look at the offense. Pull a Matt Rule from 2020. You just use all 9 picks on defense.
Yeah, not that necessarily worked out for him, but
That's true.
It is what it is. Okay, so there you go. We are through with our first 8 teams on our early team needs report. I should say reports because we have 2 more of them to go. Thursday, there'll be 10 teams, and then next Monday we'll have 14. So 8, 10, 14, that'll give us the entire 32. And then after that, as we said in the open, it'll be on to our first mock draft. So looking forward to it, man.
Yes, sir. That
This
was
was
fun.
fun.
Yep.
You know,
It's fun
I mean,
that,
when you get going in the season, sometimes you get really. I mean, you can't follow 32 teams all
Right.
season long when you're doing.
Right.
So it's fun to kind of get. This is the time we get to get caught up again with all the other teams.
And you could really start to project what's going to happen. And there's less moving parts now, and once we get these coaching staffs set in place, it's going to be a little bit easy to really formalize what these teams are actually going to have to do in the draft.
All right, Dave. So again, the rankings, your updated 96, that is available at ourlads.com. We'll put a link in the description area as well, so you can check that out. And don't forget, questions, comments, anything at all regarding what we had to say here for those 8 teams. And we will continue, again, in order. So we don't care about trades. So in order of where the teams record-wise, one-loss record-wise, would have landed in the draft. We'll pick that up with number 9. Who's number 9? Is that the Saints?
The Carolina Panthers.
Carolina and then the Saints?
Yes. We go. Yep. Carolina, Saints, Titans.
Wow, that's like an NFC South way to so it's Falcons, Panthers, and Saints all in a row?
Back to back to back.
Wow. That's crazy. But that's the NFC South this year. So.
Yep.
All right, Dave. As always, great job. We'll talk on Thursday.
All right. Thank you, Greg.